Hey, welcome back, guys. I recently got a chance to check out Omari Hardwick's new film, Spell, which arrived just in time for the Halloween harvest season. It's one of the first post-Power projects by stars' former leading man, and if you watch it as a continuation of his story in an alternate universe, it's arguably more fun. Hardwick maintains all of the qualities that made him beloved to millions over Power's 6-season run, and in today's video, we'll be reviewing it in full. So if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, you might want to check it out first. I rented it for $9 on Amazon Prime, and it was a wild ride to say the least. One of those films to kick back with your significant other and run for shits, giggles, and a tinge of terror. With that being said, I now present to you Ghost Goes to Hell, Spell, movie review. Did I mention I'd be using the names Ghost and Marquis, Spell's lead character name, interchangeably? Well, I'll be using both names interchangeably. My love for Power and Omari's unparalleled performance there is what made me watch this movie. So just to clear that up for y'all, before we begin, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell notification to immediately receive these videos. Also, big thank you to all of my channel donors. I sincerely appreciate you, and you make my work possible here. If you'd like to be the next one, drop $1 on that Cash App for us. Lastly, a spoiler alert is now in effect. Here we go. Our story begins with Ghost, here known as Marquis T. Woods, a big city lawyer who superseded his abusive upbringing to become an American success story. His name is modeled after the great Black American inventor Granville T. Woods, who is also known as the Black Edison for his prowess in the electrical field. Marquis is your typical affluent Black American. He doesn't allow his emotions or cultural ties to his community dictate how he performs his job and daily ongoings. This sentiment is highlighted in the conversation Mark conducts with his boss, Wyman Thatcher. He's of the class that feels the need to demonstrate their loyalty to the system and not society. In fact, he looks down on the unrefined, something that can be attributed to his upbringing, but we'll get there in just a second. This disdain is subtle, though ever present. In this film, Ghost has a wife that actually appreciates him, a son that actually loves him, and a daughter unaffected by street violence, so that's good. In all seriousness though, Marquis built quite the stable life for his family and spares no expense when it comes to their happiness, something his wife believes is hurting their children more than helping from a value system perspective. Marquis gets a call from Kentucky that his father has passed, something that dredges up old imagery best forgotten. In spite of this, he takes his family on a journey to the South to pay his respects. He sets out on this trip via his own private plane, as Marquis is also an accomplished pilot. They stop off in a desolate, seemingly deserted town to fuel up the plane. Upon entering the gas station, he notices a few items pertaining to what he views as backwards practices and superstition. In short, he ain't feeling it. You can tell it recalls unpleasantries for him, issues revealed as the story progresses. While at the station, he and his family encounter a few of the locals, and needless to say, they are less than hospitable. The theme here is that as much as he and his family look down on these folks, they resent him as well. Even more apparent, they despise what he represents. An affluent Black person with no regard for matters pertaining to the spirit. Before taking off, the family is pulled over by the town sheriff. Marquis hits him with a variety of truth bullets on the legality of flying his plane through their modest town, and they mock him a bit for good measure, as he is country as hell, both in accent and demeanor. He tells the sheriff where he's headed and that he needs to get going as there's a big storm coming. Once they finally take off, the storm increases in volatility. Marquis and his wife get into a brief dispute over their children's increasingly entitled behavior. He highlights that he didn't want them to experience the things he did growing up and how he couldn't get out of that jungle fast enough, to which his wife replies, "Sometimes that jungle comes back to find you." Her assertion is a major theme of the film and a foreshadowing of the hellish events to come. The plane is struck by lightning and presumably crashes. In the next scene, we get a flashback of Marquis' father urging him to take a knife to the gut of a squealing pig. This is the first of many flashbacks that hints to the audience Marquis' true background and origin. Ghost awakens in a strange bed within an even stranger environment with no member of his family in sight. This is where the movie really starts moving. We're shown a visibly injured and disoriented Marquis, notably his foot, which gives him hell upon an attempt to walk. We're then shown the primary antagonist and legend herself, Loretta Devine, who portrays Miss Eloise. Now, Eloise is downright terrifying. Like, everything that lady says and does is horrific. Loretta Devine really killed that shit. Just had to let y'all know before we continue. If there's any reason to watch this movie other than support for the Ghost Man, it's Loretta Devine. Moving right along, Marquis insists on his family's whereabouts, to which Eloise feigns ignorance. She really loses it once Mark uses the Lord's name in vain, something he should know better than to do. After all, Eloise is a true Big Mama. Like, Big Mama on steroids. The fuck is wrong with you, Ghost? Anyways, Eloise calls out for her husband Earl, who you might recognize from the Purge film series. Earl enters the room like, chill, woman, you know my heart all fucked up and whatnot. And the old couple laugh it up, officially scaring Marquis and myself for that matter. Keep that heart reference in mind too, by the way. It's gonna be important later. Earl subsequently calls for Lewis, the third member of the home. Lewis is big as hell and frightening just in stature alone. In retrospect, this scene was a great way to introduce Marquis's captors. To awaken in an unknown environment with no idea where your family is and have all these creepy-ass people initiate you to your very own new world order is pretty sick. Lewis finally enters the chat, and needless to say, he ain't bullshitting. He throws Ghost back on the bed, and Earl reveals to him that he was in an accident. Ghost continues to struggle, but is put back to sleep by the root work of Eloise. To clarify, root work is an ancestral form of alchemy, which includes herbalism, mediumship, and divination. It's a mainstay of the hoodoo tradition, a spiritual practice brought to the Americas by enslaved Africans and utilized as a tool of healing and rebellion. We're shown the former aspect of its use in the scenes to come. Next, Eloise awakens Marquis and introduces him to the Boogity. Now, the Boogity the scariest nigga in the movie, bar none. Next to Eloise and Lewis, the Boogity got it. The Boogity doll is a hoodoo figure that is used to drain one's life essence. Ghost doll was created from his own hair, flesh, blood, and brace yourselves, semen. Gross, right? It gets deeper. The Boogity is connected to its host and can be used to harm it if need be. It's a key plot point in the film, as the Boogity is the main conduit for Eloise's spell on Marquis. Following the Boogity revelation, Marquis escapes through a window to the roof and witnesses a hoodoo ceremony where Eloise reignites people's non-functioning properties with animal parts. This is only a temporary measure until the blood moon comes, as Earl exclaims, bringing further clarity to the family's insidious intentions. We're shown a woman regaining her voice from the tongue of a cat, and a man regaining his sight using the eyes of a goat. The latter nearly discovers Marquis, and he's forced to rush back to his quarters before being discovered. That rain surely didn't help his case here, though. The two later have an oppositional discourse on the subject of spirituality and healing powers, Marquis predictably dissenting Eloise's chosen spiritual practice, garnering an Obamacare reference in her rebuttal. I don't know, man. Pissing off your lead captor and holder of your fate just isn't a good course of action, but the Ghost Man does just that, unable to relinquish his own biases against a path formerly forced on him by his father. Miss Eloise's contempt spills over for his kind as well. She has an aversion to the modern Negro, if you will, those who've ascended and forgotten where they come from. It's a major undertone of the film in respect to class and elitism, a theme that's ongoing throughout Spell. In fact, the next dream of Marquis's father speaks to this very dynamic, as the Elder Woods repeatedly states, "You think you better than me, boy?" These visions further suggest Marquis's motivation for his contemporary success and current predicament. Marquis awakens yet again and begins eating, unknowingly strengthening the Boogity as he strengthens himself. He apologizes to Miss Eloise for talking all that dumb shit, and she accepts, revealing her knowledge of his physical scars and origin of them. The exchange they have in this scene is almost heartfelt, and it removes the audience temporarily from the insidious nature of their union. This speaks again to the greatness of Loretta Devine in this role, as she's both the captor and the comforter, the grandma and the grandmaster of this entire ordeal. She really should consider more roles in this lane. Marquis notices a bell he intends to implement in another escape plot. Despite the present niceties on display by Eloise, he accesses the ringer for later use while Eloise fixes him another helping. She encourages Ghost to cast the bones from his plate to tell his future, and claims to foresee him reuniting with his family on the night of the blood moon. She also stresses the importance of him merging with his ancient self and remembering who he is. Once she leaves him, he apprehensively casts the bones, and lo and behold, the image forms a human hand. And not just any human hand, but that of his own son, broken finger and all. I can't lie, Loretta was wicked for that play. It's here where Marquis realized he was in deeper shit than he could ever imagine, and had to act fast. He sneaks out, and nearly gets discovered in a few close calls. However, Eloise realizes he's gone just as Ghost tries to make his way through the forest. Upon the harsh journey, Marquis finds the fallen aircraft that landed him in captivity to begin with. The desolate plain is filled with nothing but blood and despair. Also, an unknown Boogity can be seen carved in one of the trees. Marquis spots a nearby cabin, but is tackled ferociously by Lewis. He then has yet another flurry of flashbacks dealing with this tumultuous relationship with his father. His father states during this series that, "You gotta believe it or it won't work." The father also chides Ghost for his high and mighty demeanor towards his culture. Ghost awakens in the same bed with his foot rebandaged just as the twisted trio was heading out. He goes to unravel that foot and finds a big-ass nail spike hanging from the bottom of it. This is arguably one of the illest scenes, as he literally pulls that shit out. It's pretty gross, but this movie isn't lost on the concept, given what we've seen thus far. I remember watching this thinking, how in the hell Ghost ain't bleed out right here? But movie magic gotta count for something, right? Right. Moving right along. Marquis continues his search for his missing family following that big-ass nail spike fiasco. He discovers 3 graves outside, the same graves we saw Lewis digging earlier. He rushes to uncover them, fearing the worst. Thankfully, the graves are occupied by dead animals and not dead bodies. He then makes his way to the barn in search of his flock. In his journey, he stumbles upon a hoodoo house of horrors, complete with dead bodies, corpses, boogies, and a throwback photograph timestamped 1860, which is really a mindfuck. Actually, this entire scene is a mindfuck, and some of the imagery is too graphic for this commentator's YouTube account. But taking in the full grotesqueness of it all is astonishing to say the least, and it only gets crazier, as Marquis finds the real reason he's been held captive all this time. Yes, you guessed it, they're placing a spell on him. All of Eloise's maneuvers are revisited in a montage parallel with Mark's current revelations: blood of my blood, seed of my seed, and flesh of my flesh. All of these rituals were run on him over the course of his dark tenure in the house. Ghost, now fully aware of the plot against him, goes on the offensive. He decides to fight fire with fire by creating his own boogity in hopes of gaining an advantage over the evil enchantress, recalling the words of his father, "If you don't believe it, it won't work." This brings us to another theme within the film. That's the theme of Sankofa. For those who don't know, the Sankofa is a symbol used by African people depicted as a bird with his head turned backwards, retrieving an egg from its back. It emphasizes the importance of reaching back in order to properly progress forward. Marquis does just that through embracing the very magic once taught to him, but long forgotten and repressed. He sets a few more traps, then makes his way back into the house, but not before finally gaining access to that long sought-after phone. The phone actually belongs to his son, offering more insight into his family's survival status. Our fearsome trio returns, and Ghost heads back to his quarters and puts that big-ass nail spike back in his foot for optics. It couldn't be me, but honestly, I can't say I would have pulled that shit out my foot. Okay, I'm probably lying. The villains enter ready for war, but find Marquis laid up. Once they leave, he immediately tries to hack his son's phone in order to get help. He does, and calls 911, which somehow directly connects him to the Cypress Valley Police Department and that sheriff who lightweight hassled him earlier in the film. The sheriff informs him that his wife and daughter are safe, but they haven't found his son just yet. Distraught at the sinister possibilities, Mark is instructed to stay by the phone as the sheriff knows his location. He once again pulls the big-ass nail spike out his foot. But as the sheriff pulls up, Eloise enters the room and bitch slaps the boogity, sending Ghost flying to the bed in pain. Not gonna lie, that was the funniest shit ever. As funny as it was terrifying. She maintains the pressure, which further inhibits Mark. Remember, whatever comes to the boogity, gonna come to you. And she does all types of shit to the boogity, most notably removing its tongue and bounding it by rope, rendering the ghost man utterly defenseless. He observes Eloise and Earl conversing with the sheriff and tries to holler out the window, but that shit ain't working. He also attempts to scream his heart out through the phone, but to no avail. Ghost once again attempts to escape along with the boogity, but is confronted by Eloise and Earl, the latter of which is instructed to fetch Lewis. The blood moon is shown rising shortly thereafter, signaling that we're in the spell endgame. On the run, he encounters the sheriff in the forest. Mark frees the boogity and reinstates his tongue, allowing him to move and speak freely again. He then tells all on Eloise, Earl, and big-ass Lewis, his words, not mine. The sheriff acts like he ain't hearing it, obviously fooled by the kindness of that sweet old couple. In his condemnations of Eloise and her backwards-ass Afro-Appalachian cult, Marquis doesn't realize that the sheriff is bringing him right back to where he just escaped. But look at this dude. I mean, really look at him. He looks compromised from the start, as if Eloise did some root work on him in a previous ceremony. If bringing him back to the country prison wasn't enough, he then ups Bango on him and casts him as bougie. In fact, a lot of the heat Ghost catches during this hellish stint is due to him being typecast as a bougie Negro. Those among our community who think their fancy suits and good diction make them better. This film kind of plays out like Revenge of the Geechees, or whatever Sergeant Waters once said. By the way, the sheriff's name is Tom, which is what we call irony, children. They pull Ghost from the car and prepare him for the final stage of the protracted spell. Once forcibly dragged inside the barn, he finally sees his family, all of which are alive, yet heavily sedated. Now the full plot is on display. Eloise and the crew plan to use Ghost and his family's ancillary parts, i.e. body parts, to replace failed systems in their cult members. Earl hinted at such diabolical intentions during the initial hoodoo ceremony, where he stated, quote, "We're using animal parts tonight, but we'll have human parts for you once the blood moon comes." Eloise desires Ghost's heart, deeming it his greatest quality, something the movie depicts time and again. After all, it took heart to circumvent his torturous upbringing to be something more in this life. And it took heart to gain as much ground as he did in his escape attempts. A bit of movie magic too, but you get the point nevertheless. She needed Marquis at maximum strength in order to transplant his heart to her husband Earl, and she almost succeeded too. However, at the moment of truth, Marquis awakens and stabs Earl in his chest, much to the shock of the evil cult. So everybody starts running around and shit, Ghost going full Rambo, and a flashback plays of him preparing for the fateful blood moon event. He then applies root work to reignite his zombified family. It's a heartfelt moment. I mean, he been getting his ass whooped the entire movie, so relief here was warranted. That is, before he notices his son's missing hand. We all know where that ended up. Mark finally catches up with that traitorous-ass sheriff and gives him that work. He then retrieves a boogity previously hidden during one of his escape attempts. Lewis and Ghost have a final showdown, and Lewis is defeated due to some preemptive thinking by Mark. Eloise discovers Lewis's boogity in the well, which caused him to drown mid-combat. After this, Ellie confronts Mark, but is stopped by her own root work. He reveals to her that he created a specially made boogity for this standoff and rocks the doll with a hammer, sending Eloise hilariously flying through the barn. Similar to the last boogity hit, that shit was funny as hell. The barn burns in the next shot, and Eloise tries to pull the old, "Oh, I'm an old lady, you just gonna let an old lady burn?" Nah, son. You don't get to be a murderous psychopath and an old lady when the karma catches up. Well, maybe in 2020. Shit, anything is possible out here now. Anywho, Mark states that she taught him a lot, but so did his pops. If the flashbacks were any indication, then those lessons would be rooted in belief and aggression when necessary. Two lessons that ultimately freed Marquis. He creates a salt barrier at the door, trapping Ellie in the barn as it burns, and subsequently explodes. He then is approached by one of the lynch mob members who declares, "You got the juice now." Well, not exactly, but it certainly looked like he was gonna say that shit. Ghost threatens that if they don't allow him peaceful passage, then all of the remaining boogities would be eliminated. They wisely let him through unharmed. He and his family watch as the barn burns. The quartet then make their way back to civilization. We get a final shot of Ellie's original boogity, which awakens as the camera zooms in, suggesting the enchantress is still alive somewhere beneath the charred rubble. All things considered, I must say I enjoyed this movie. It's certainly not without its flaws and overt caricatures in between, but the social message isn't lost despite these shortcomings. That theme of elitist versus blue-collar/lower class is as old as W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and probably even older than that. I did love Loretta Devine's portrayal as Eloise, as well as Omari's performance, but I'm biased. Ghost is great in everything, arguably one of the most expressive actors of our time from a gesture standpoint. It's the subtle contortions that truly set him apart. Overall, Ghost Goes to Hell, Spell, is a fun ride, and probably even more enjoyable with the right motivations, if you know what I mean. At least that's how I watched it. Just don't watch this one too late, unless you're conjuring up demonic spirits, which in that case, throw it on at your leisure. Thank you for watching today's video. What did you think of Spell? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. A few of you have inquired about my background instrumentals. For the record, I make all of them myself. If you need music for a podcast, maybe you're a YouTuber like me, or performance purposes, i.e. singing, rapping, etc., just shoot me an email to rudypmagicbeats@gmail.com. That's rudypmagicbeats@gmail.com. I might start throwing some videos on the channel of me cooking up beats as well, so let me know if that's something that you'd like to see. Also, I'll be reinstating my Beats website in the coming weeks, so be on the lookout for that as well. Once again, thank you all for watching. If you liked today's video, drop $1 on that Cash App for us, hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more content such as this. This is Rudy P. Magic of Rudy P. Magic Beats, and have a blessed one until the next one. Peace, y'all.